Belem Tower turned out to be a terrifying hell? In the early 19th century Europe, the Industrial Revolution was in full swing, with countries expanding their ambitions and military power growing by leaps and bounds. One May, a new batch of prisoners arrived at the famous Belem Tower on the Tagus River in the capital of Portugal, Lisbon. Belem Tower was built during the Age of Discovery with the initial purpose of defending Lisbon's harbor. At that time, Portugal was one of the important maritime powers, with explorers like Vasco da Gama and Ferdinand Magellan bringing immense wealth to the region from expeditions launched from Lisbon's harbor. However, centuries later, with the exploration of the world map completed and the construction of more ports and fortresses, Belem Tower gradually lost its original function and became a customs house, telegraph station, and lighthouse. Later, it acquired another function, serving as a prison for detainees. "Is this our prison?" exclaimed a prisoner named John as he gazed at the ship-like Belem Tower. But Jack, standing next to him, coldly poured cold water on him. "Do you think we'll be living on the ground? Let me tell you, it's said that we'll be taken into the dungeons." Just the thought of being thrown into a dark dungeon made John's head spin. He murmured, "Oh no, I don't want to live in darkness." At that moment, the escort officer heard the prisoners whispering and sternly shouted, "No talking. Do you hear me?" The prisoners obediently fell silent and one by one approached Belem Tower. This white tower, entirely built of stone, stood out prominently on the riverbank like a large white ship. As the prisoners observed Belem Tower from up close, they couldn't help but marvel at this beautiful structure. But alas, it was a prison. The realization weighed heavily on John's heart. He had stolen a child's bread because he had no money to eat, only to find out that the child was the commander's son. Now he was locked up in Belem Tower, unsure of when he would be released. The jailer opened the door and led the prisoners inside. John walked barefoot on the white marble, feeling a piercing chill. He entered a narrow staircase and began descending. As he did, the sunlight gradually faded, and dim torchlight flickered into everyone's eyes. "You are lucky to be staying in a palace built by the king," mocked the warden sarcastically, kicking John's buttocks hard for walking too slowly. But the prisoners did not rejoice at this. Even if this was a palace, it was still a prison, wasn't it? The dungeons had several levels, and John and Jack were locked up on the second-to-last level. It was said that the bottommost level housed the most serious offenders who would never leave Belem Tower alive. In the evening, John was lost in thought when suddenly he heard a cacophony of wails and cries coming from below. He quickly asked Jack what was happening, but Jack was also clueless. The older inmate in the same cell casually remarked, "It's just the tide coming in. What are you afraid of?" But the next day, at dusk, the agonizing cries rang out again, like sharp knives piercing John's heart. He couldn't bear it anymore and went to ask the old prisoner for an explanation, but all he got was, "It's the tide again." A few days later, some wardens came and carried out several bodies from the bottommost level. That's when John learned that the agonizing cries came from the condemned prisoners who were about to die. This realization terrified him even more, and he felt that Belem Tower was extremely terrifying. The cries continued every day. John fell ill as a result, and his condition worsened. Jack pleaded with the guards to take John out for treatment, saying, "If he's not treated soon, he'll die." The guard glanced at John and indeed took him out. But instead of taking him away, the guard directly sent him to the bottommost level of the dungeon. John lay on the damp, cold ground, smelling the stench emanating from all directions, feeling increasingly dizzy. By evening, water began seeping out of the ground and walls, gradually submerging John's body. John struggled to open his eyes and suddenly understood everything. It turned out that due to the rising tide, the dungeons of Belem Tower would be submerged, and the cries of those prisoners were their last shouts before death. Unfortunately, John couldn't scream anymore. He used his last bit of strength to watch his life disappear in Belem Tower, this ancient and beautiful castle.